I think dogs have a sixth sense, and on two standpoints. One, I really do believe that my dogs have a sixth sense, and not just my dogs. I think dogs understand and react to and pick up things, and they act appropriately in almost mysterious ways. There's got to be really some basis for that. Most people say it. The dogs can read my mind sometimes. Most of the time, my dogs know before I'm ready to get in the car and I'm going outside. Do they know that when I pick the keys up, I'm going to be leaving the house? What's really going on in situations like that with dogs and cats? I find the cat hiding underneath the bed long before I get the carrier out, long before I have any idea that the cat's going to leave the house. I tiptoe up the stairs, try to find him in the spot, and he's already hiding somewhere in the closet. I don't. They have to read the day planner or something, don't they? On the night before. So can they really read our minds? And I'm going to try to illustrate that for you on a couple areas as we kind of go through this today. So do they have a sixth sense? And if they have a sixth sense, what and where and how is that working? They certainly use their eyes. They certainly use their ears. They certainly use their nose. And they process all that with their brain. Their eyes are a little different than ours. Their ears are extremely different from ours. Their nose is hyperbolically different from ours from the standpoint of sensitivity and the ranges of things that they can smell. I did a quick bit of research, and it's off the wall on how many times more sensitive the canine nose is compared to yours. And I've seen numbers anywhere between a couple of thousand to 10,000 to 100,000 times more sensitive. Particularly with smells, they have a memory bank for smells that's unbelievable. They're very sensitive to body language. They're very sensitive to voice tones. They're very sensitive to patterns and habits that are present in their environment. We take advantage of that from time to time. Well, more from time to time, we create habits, routines. That's what training essentially is all about, is creating a habit and the ritual. You do a come signal, and they come, there's a habit. And we know that they can be trained to habits, but they're in the background observing our habits and taking cues from those habits. They're very sensitive to pheromones. What are pheromones? Pheromones are external to the body as opposed to the hormones that are actually a lot of argument here and there about what and how and where dogs are perceiving things. When your cortisol levels go up, the canine can identify that. As body changes in us, pheromones, substances are excreted from our cells and our pores. They talk about dogs can smell fear. We'll come back to that later. Excretions from our bodies and other dogs or cats or animals' bodies can be picked up by these canine nostrils that can be extremely sensitive. Dogs can predict weather, thunderstorms, earthquakes, and the like. Earthquakes, there's maybe tremors outside of that they can pick up. But thunder and lightning create ozone. When we have these winds that blow around the house, absolutely phenomenal. They can detect mean people. We'll look at some mechanisms they can remember scents forever. Well, if they had a negative experience with an individual, they would recognize that and be adverse to that individual. I'm 100% convinced of that. They certainly have a memory computer association with scent and people, scent and dogs and the like, and they can really differentiate. Think about bloodhounds and their ability to track things and the like. Smile. So dogs recognize facial expressions. I'm not going to say that for wolves. I'm guessing they do too. The domestic canine, dissimilar to the wolf, has more eyelid muscles, more facial muscles by a factor of about 10. We looked at all of our dogs, and they have cute eyes. They do this. They look at us lovingly. They look at us like they're hungry. They look at us like they're naughty. We make up all kinds of adjectives for what we think they look like, but they do control their expressions. Wolves do not to an extremely high degree. That's a different story. But my point is, dogs create facial expressions of their own. They're used to seeing facial expressions of their siblings, of their mothers, of their parents, and they interact or choose to interact or choose not to interact. One of the ways they choose to interact with their other canine companions that they meet on the street is through facial expressions. That's part of their body language, and they they have strong interpretations of that. In You can use smiling to a huge advantage with your dogs in training and other things, and you can use frowning the same way. When you want to communicate, you broke that thing, you can sit there and frown at him without any verbal type things, and you can probably communicate a um, I'm not interested, I disapprove of what you just did. In obedience competition with distance stays, where you line your dog up on one side of a big tennis court, you walk 20 yards away, you turn around and face the dog for 3 minutes. The dog's supposed to sit there on a sit stay, and you're supposed to sit there and do nothing. Well, I sit there and smile with the dog. You can't wave at them. You can't do body motions. You can't talk to them. Those are all against the rules. But it's not against the rules to sit there and smile. So when the dog turns and looks at you and you smile, you give him some reinforcing behavior that maybe you're supposed to stay there, as opposed to get up and wander around and sniff the dog next door and get disqualified. So I think smiling is a two-way street. I think dogs can smile at in their own way at you and at other dogs and communicate a high level of trust, a high level of reinforcement, and you can smile at them to create the same thing. We'll just stay with that. They took caricatures of faces, a happy face with a smile and an unhappy face with a frown, and they and there was kind of a touch screen type computer type thing. And it was somewhat difficult, I think, to get them to touch the screen. But when they started touching the screen, they would reward them for touching the smile and not reward them for touching the frowny face. And so when they got that consistent, they substituted people faces with smiles and people faces with frowny faces. And what the dogs consistently did is they touched the screen with a people happy face and not with the frowny face. They were able to differentiate that type of what I thought was a really interesting experiment. They can differentiate between fact and fantasy. They can differentiate between truth, and lies. They did an experiment where with a person in the room, they did an experiment with a whole person in the room with a smile and did happy things with the dog and gave him a treat. They got a separate person that was very neutral but gave them a treat, and they got a third person that acted badly with the dog and didn't give them a treat. They changed dogs and they changed actors and they repeated the behavior with a person doing the same thing with the rewarding behavior. The dog wanted to engage and they got a treat. The dog wanted to engage with the neutral person most of the time, but not all the time. And when the dog was interacting with the unhappy person, they didn't want to interact with them at all. I thought that was really interesting. A parallel type experiment that they did was with food, and they were trying to prove whether dogs could tell whether you were lying to them or trying to trick them or the like. And so they would put a food bowl down. The handler, the owner, the subject would point to the food bowl down. He pointed at it, and the dog got some food. And they would repeat that until they understood that if you point at it, you got the food. They then took the same group of dogs, put down a food bowl, but without any food in it. And the dog would go over to it and not get rewarded. They're not getting rewarded for an empty bowl, but they are getting rewarded for someone pointing at the true bowl. So the person would now point at an empty bowl, and the dog would come over to the empty bowl and not get any food. They would go back to the full bowl, the food bowl or the treat bowl or whatever what they were using to reinforce their behavior, and put the food bowl down um, that was empty and pointed at the empty bowl. So the final test was to put down the treat bowl with the treats and point at it. And the guy that was lying about having the food before, even though he now is pointing at real food, the dog was suspicious and didn't trust him about getting the food bowl. So I hope I explained that correctly. The dog learned that the person was trying to trick him into getting a food bowl that was empty. And so when he really gave him the food bowl with real food in it, he was suspicious of it and he didn't believe him. I thought that was really, really interesting. In dogs and in people, scent activates a section of the brain that you might call the pleasure center. And it's the same section of the brain that perfume or cologne will activate in people. And that activation is associated with pleasure or good activity, so to speak. And the pathways are very similar in dogs and in people. And dogs apparently have a very strong memory for that, much stronger than even the memory that you and I have. One interesting experiment was that they measured how excited the dog was based upon how long they had been separated from their significant other. And the longer that the dog was separated, the more explosive and more excited they were to see them on their return. The flip side of that is long absences. We're talking about many days and the like. The dogs exhibited a decrease in their comfort level, and their behaviors would change. And I think we've seen that to a high degree. And when if a significant other loved one has to go away from school, or God forbid die, the dogs will go through a distinct level of comfort level drop, and we need to be aware of that and kind of substitute some type of reinforcement for them. Otherwise, they can go into a significant decline. We talked a little bit about facial expressions. If that was a situation where you would be on the street and you encountered a situation that you were afraid, individual that you didn't like, maybe an animal you didn't like, maybe another dog you didn't like, maybe there's a coyote down the street. I don't know what situation, something that scared you, that you were afraid of. The dog on your end of the leash is going to pick up on that right away, and they're liable to interact in a protective manner to you, whether or not you want that to happen or not. Sometimes you really want it to happen, and if you want Fido to react adversely to an individual because you are afraid, communicate that fear to your dog. Just kind of grab them, tighten up in the leash, and say, if you're talking about an individual, I would use verbiage like, no, back, stay away from it. So, and that will amp up your dog and make him want to go protective even more. So you may not have a personal protection dog, but that could turn him into a protection dog pretty darn quickly. We know that sweating and perspiration on our end of the leash is going to produce adrenaline, probably cortisol and the like, and dogs will pick up on that hormone. So that's one mechanism by which their sixth sense is activated, so to speak. I have clients all the time that tell me that they're getting in a relationship with a person, and their dog or the cat doesn't like that person. What should I do to make them like that person? Is one of their questions to ask me. And there's a whole bunch. You can try your own set of pheromones, because the dog appeasing pheromones available in room diffusers and collars and a few things, and there's one for cats as well. But I wonder if what the dog is picking up on is that they themselves are not 100% sure and confident about this person in the relationship, and they're a little bit nervous about this thing growing and the like. I think that's more likely than anything else why the dog doesn't like them. Now, maybe I think that, well, I shouldn't say more likely. I think that's a real possibility. The other possibility is that this person does have some malattent, some surge in his cortisone levels. Maybe he's nervous about dating the person or whatsoever. Maybe, but it could be that he's exuding some type of activity that the dog's picking up on. And although I make some suggestions with people along those lines, my immediate reaction would be, my bottom line reaction is, I would trust the dog more than I trusted my own feelings. I see that I've done that for decades with service people, with repair people around the house. I mean, just a plumber has got to come in and fix something. It's a one and done type thing. But if you've got a project and you're going to be painting the house for weeks or months, you're going to be doing the landscaping or whatsoever, I want them to meet the dogs and see how they react to the dogs and make sure the dogs aren't sitting there growling at them 24/7. Because one, even if they're really good and the dog's wrong, they're liable to get bit while they're on the property, and I have no interest in that. But the dogs are going to be a better judge of their character, probably than I am in a 15, 20-minute interview. The statistics are overwhelmingly high that if you get bit once, the likelihood of getting bit a second time is extremely high. And if you get bit on the face, it's even higher than that. And it approaches like 70%. This says 72% in this one study. And I've always fell back on that person is radiating something that says, bite me. And I don't know exactly what that is. It's this sixth senses thing. It's a combination of all these factors that we're talking about. But if you think about the likelihood of somebody getting bit on the face, well, what's it take to get bit on the face? I got to put my face in the dog. I don't think we're talking about people that are at 6 feet away and the dog runs over and grabs them in the face. I think we've got essentially toddlers, young kids that aren't supposed to be there, go up and put their dog in their face in the dog, and the dog reacts the way he's supposed to. I'm certain that that's not 100%, but I think if somebody's getting bit in the face, I think Fido's probably doing what he's supposed to because he's threatened or scared. So, but that creates a whole bunch of possibilities, because if these are toddlers and youngsters and young people, now they're imprinted that doggy is nasty. And by the way, the bites on the face are significantly worse than the bites on arms or appendages or anything else. A lot of these kids need plastic surgery. Adults will need plastic surgery and the like. So that leaves a striking negative association with doggy. And so when that individual encounters the next doggy, I'm going to hide the fact that I'm afraid the capacity you have so that you don't get bit again is pretty much minimal, and they're going to get bit over and over and over again. I've had individuals that work for me from time to time over the years, and there'll be one person out of 20, 30, 50 that gets bit and gets bit and gets bit. You do the workers' comp claims and things like that. There was an animal control officer, and she was a gem of a person. And she loved dogs. She actually had one of my Bernese Mountain dogs. She was always getting bit, and we talked about that at length from time to time. And I have really no idea what was going on with that, and neither did she. Dogs definitely recognize body language from other dogs because of their need to understand their own species, number one, to interact with their own species, number two, and to associate that so they can be normal, healthy citizens. And I think they learn that interaction and how to interpret that at fairly young ages. And I think that's why puppies interact with puppies, and then they try to interact with you at the same way. And that doesn't necessarily work, does it? But when two dogs meet each other, I want you to be aware of and watch for 3 or 4 different signals that the two dogs are doing. One, how stiff or how relaxed their body posture is, how much they want to engage in play or not, how nervous they act. Watch facial expressions. about their nose and the ways their nose is twitching or not, and watch facial expressions about whether their lips are stiff or whether they're relaxed in their face and their eyes. Remember, their eyes have a lot of muscles that they have control over and the like. We talked a little bit about earthquake and weather. It's strongly believed that the dogs can sense tremors long before that you and I are ever aware of them. And with weather changes, ozone and other things in the environment, their olfactory system is certainly capable of picking up, apparently from long, long distances away. So the other most very interesting thing that the canine nose is now respected for, identified for, and trained for is disease detection. It's well recognized that cancer can be detected. There's now Davis, University of California, Davis pioneered one major group, but I'm certain there's others floating around. There's a medical detection, I don't want to call it university, but program to train dogs to detect the cancer. They can detect it in people themselves or in samples of the breath samples, urine samples, swabs from various tissue, and the like. Dogs are already trained to work with diabetic patients and to detect a drop in blood sugar. If my blood sugar drops and I start getting catecholamine release, maybe adrenaline release, because my system's thinking about going into shock. So dogs can detect the blood sugar drops for diabetics. They certainly can detect seizure. They've been trained to detect malaria. They can detect Parkinson's disease. And early in 2020, there were people that were using dogs to detect COVID, and they were going to use them for screening people in high areas like airports. I don't know how far that program got, but with the advent of with vaccines and travel restrictions, I don't think that program went too much farther. So, kind of bringing it home, dogs use their eyes to detect and assimilate things like body language. Body language is huge. If you look at most obedience and you look at your dog's interaction with you, um, you're using body language to communicate to them to a much higher degree than the verbal signals. These highly trained dogs on the agility field, they're not listening to their owners. They're looking at hand signals and body language. And if a dog goes off course, it's probably because the owner, the handler, was doing this and they shifted their shoulder one way or the other, or they moved their hips one way or the other, and the dog went off course. I'm exaggerating, but 99 times out of 100, the dogs are off course or have a problems because of handler error. Handler error. So ears, we talked about how sensitive they are to sound, how they can pick up sounds from distances, how they can remember those sounds. Nose, how significant, how hyperbolic their nasal sensitivity is compared to ours. They can remember those smells. And then their brain, they process all of that. And I think the combination of all of those definitely gives them a sixth sense or a capacity to understand and interpret and to act on their environment at a level that we can't experience ourselves or perform ourselves and kind of marvel at. So that's do dogs have a sixth sense? I'm gonna say yes. Yes, dogs have a sixth sense.